The cargo pod split open like a cracked egg, and everything went wrong in seconds. David Cole had his hands buried in the guts of an atmospheric processor when the explosion rattled through the loading bay. He pulled back, wiping grease from his fingers, and watched as purple emergency lights flooded the station corridors. The alarm system screamed in 3 different alien languages before settling on standard galactic common. Something was loose. David grabbed his toolkit and headed toward the main corridor, but a Quillan security officer stopped him with one furry hand raised. The alien's face showed pure terror, ears flat against his skull. "Stay back, human." Ravenclaw breach. "Full lockdown in 30 seconds, David frowned. He had heard of Ravenclaws but never seen one. The reputation was enough. Across 17 star systems, these creatures were known as unstoppable killers. Their cubs alone had ended more lives than some small wars. They were fast, strong, and smart enough to open sealed doors. The security officer was already running. David heard the heavy blast doors beginning to slide shut throughout the station. He had maybe 20 seconds to reach a safe zone. Instead, he pulled up the security feed on his handheld device and watched the chaos unfold in the docking bay. The creature was small, probably juvenile, but it moved with terrifying speed. Its body was covered in scales that shifted between black and deep violet under the station lights. 6 eyes glowed like hot amber in the darkness. It had 4 legs built like coiled springs and a long tail that whipped back and forth as it searched the area. Station personnel scattered in every direction. A Fornax cargo handler tried to seal himself in a storage unit, but the Ravenclaw tore through the metal like paper. The handler escaped through a vent shaft, leaving his equipment behind. David noticed something others had missed. The creature was limping. Its right rear leg dragged slightly, and there was a dark smear along its side. Blood, probably. The cargo pod it came from had sharp edges where it ruptured, and the cub must have been cut during the crash. More importantly, the sounds it made were not hunting calls. David had grown up on a farming colony on the edge of human space where predators were part of daily life. He knew the difference between aggression and distress. This creature was scared and hurt. The blast door sealed shut in front of him with a heavy thud. David was trapped in Section 7, a maintenance area that connected to the lower decks. According to his device, the Ravenclaw was 2 sections away and moving fast. His communicator buzzed. It was Commander Brent, the Quillan who ran station operations. "All personnel remain in sealed areas. Do not attempt to move. Wildlife Control has been contacted. They will arrive in 6 hours. Until then, we wait 6 hours." David looked at his screen again. The creature had stopped moving. It was in Section 5 in one of the old storage bays that nobody used anymore. The security camera showed it lying down, favoring its injured side. "Commander, this is David Cole in Section 7. I have visual on the creature. It is hurt and not acting aggressive." There was a long pause. Then Brent's voice came back, sharp with stress. "Cole, you are a maintenance technician, not a xenobiologist. That thing has killed trained hunters. Stay where you are." David switched through different camera angles. The Ravenclaw cub was alone in the dark, bleeding, probably hungry, and surrounded by unfamiliar smells and sounds. It was a recipe for panic, which would make it truly dangerous. "Commander, I grew up around predators. This one is scared, not hunting." "Negative, Cole. You do not understand what Ravenclaws are capable of. There are documented cases of juveniles taking down armed teams. They are classified as extreme threat level across all civilized systems." David understood the fear. He really did. But he also understood something the galactic community seemed to have forgotten. Predators were not mindless killing machines. They were animals with instincts, needs, and emotions. Fear made them dangerous. Calm made them manageable. He looked at the blast door in front of him. There was a manual override, usually locked. But David was a maintenance tech. He knew the station's systems better than most. The override panel was hidden behind a wall plate that he could remove in under a minute. "Cole, acknowledge your orders. Stay in position." David pulled out his multi-tool and started unscrewing the wall plate. "Cole, do you copy?" The panel came free. Behind it was the override switch, a simple mechanical lever that would open the door regardless of the lockdown. David hesitated for just a moment. If he was wrong about the creature, he would die badly. Ravenclaws were known for their speed and their bite force, which could crush bone like dry wood. But if he was right, a scared and injured animal would die alone, either from its wounds or from the wildlife control team that would shoot first and ask questions never. David threw the lever. The blast door groaned and began to slide open. "Cole, what are you doing?" "Cole, respond immediately." David stepped through the opening and into the corridor. The lights were dimmed for station night cycle, casting everything in shades of gray and blue. Somewhere ahead, the Ravenclaw cub was waiting. "Commander, I am going to check on our guest. I will keep my communicator open. You are violating direct orders. Return to your position now." David removed the earpiece and tucked it into his pocket. He could still hear Brent's voice, tiny and distant, shouting threats and warnings. He ignored it and started walking toward Section 5, his footsteps echoing in the empty station. Time to meet a Ravenclaw. Section 5 smelled like rust and old plastic. David moved slowly through the corridor, keeping his footsteps light and steady. The walls were lined with abandoned storage containers and broken equipment that nobody had bothered to clear out. Dust hung in the air, visible in the thin emergency lighting. He heard it before he saw it. A low rumbling sound like distant thunder came from the storage bay ahead. The door was half open, jammed in place by years of neglect. David approached carefully and peered through the gap. The Ravenclaw cub was pressed into the far corner of the bay, its body coiled tight. Those 6 amber eyes locked onto David immediately, and the rumbling grew louder. Not quite a growl, but definitely a warning. The creature was about the size of an earth lion, maybe a bit larger, with a long, powerful body built for speed and strength. Its scales caught the dim light and seemed to shimmer with color. David could see the wound now. A jagged cut ran along the creature's right side, dark blood matting the scales. The rear leg was definitely injured, held at an awkward angle. "Easy there," David said softly. "Nobody here is going to hurt you." The Ravenclaw's tail lashed once, twice. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing meat. David did not move closer. Instead, he slowly sat down on the floor, about 15 feet from the creature. He kept his hands visible and his body language relaxed. The communicator in his pocket crackled with Brent's voice still shouting. David pulled it out and set it on the floor between himself and the creature, then turned the volume down until it was barely audible. The Ravenclaw watched this with intense focus, tracking every movement. "You are scared," David said, keeping his voice low and calm. "Big scary place, lots of noise, lots of strange smells. You got hurt and now you do not know what is happening." The creature's rumbling quieted slightly. Its eyes never left David. "I know what that is like. When I was young, I got lost in the fields outside my colony. There were these big animals called grinders. Mean things with tusks and bad tempers. I was alone for 2 days before my grandfather found me. Scared the whole time." David reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out his ration pack. Standard station food, nothing exciting, but it included some dried meat strips. He opened the pack carefully, making sure the Ravenclaw could see everything he was doing. Then he took out one of the meat strips and ate it himself, chewing slowly. The creature's nostrils flared. It was smelling the food. David took out another strip and placed it on the floor, then pushed it gently across the dusty surface toward the Ravenclaw. It slid about halfway between them and stopped. The creature stared at the meat, then at David, then back at the meat. "Go ahead. You must be hungry." Minutes passed. David waited patiently, not moving, barely breathing. The Ravenclaw finally shifted its weight and stretched its neck forward. It sniffed the meat strip from a distance, cautious and suspicious. Then in one quick motion, it snatched the meat and pulled back to its corner. David smiled. "Good. That is good." He pushed another strip across the floor. This time the Ravenclaw took it faster with less hesitation. David pushed a third strip, but this time he did not slide it all the way. He left it closer to himself, about 5 feet away. The creature stared at the meat for a long time. David could see the conflict in its body language. Hunger versus caution. Need versus fear. Eventually, hunger won. The Ravenclaw uncurled itself and limped forward, keeping its injured leg off the ground. It moved in short, careful steps, ready to bolt at any moment. When it reached the meat strip, it grabbed it quickly and backed away again. But this time it only went back a few feet, not all the way to the corner. Progress. David pulled out his water bottle and took a drink, then poured some water into his cupped hand and held it out. The Ravenclaw watched with clear interest. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Water is important. You lost blood, so you need to drink." He poured the water onto the floor, creating a small puddle. The Ravenclaw waited until David pulled his hand back. Then it limped forward again and lapped at the water with a long, rough tongue. It drank for several seconds, then lifted its head and looked directly at David. They stayed like that, watching each other. The rumbling had stopped. The creature's body was no longer coiled tight with fear. Its eyes were still bright and alert, but the aggressive edge was gone. David began to whistle softly. It was an old tune his grandfather had taught him, something used to calm nervous livestock back on the colony. Low and melodic, with a gentle rhythm, the Ravenclaw's ears twitched following the sound. My grandfather raised animals for a living. He always said that fear makes everything worse. Predators, prey does not matter. Fear turns a manageable situation into a disaster. But if you stay calm and show them you are not a threat, most animals will choose peace over violence. The Ravenclaw took another step closer, then another. It was now only about 6 feet away, close enough that David could smell the sharp, musky scent of its scales. Close enough that if it decided to attack, he would have no chance to defend himself. David kept whistling. He slowly extended his hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. The gesture was universal among animals. An offering, not a threat. The Ravenclaw studied his hand for a long moment. Then it leaned forward, stretching its long neck, and touched its nose to David's fingertips. The scales were warm and surprisingly smooth, like polished stone. The creature sniffed his hand carefully, learning his scent. Then it did something that would have shocked every alien on the station. It pushed its massive head against David's palm and began to purr. Not the rumbling warning sound from before, but a deep, vibrating purr that resonated through its entire body, the sound of contentment. David carefully scratched behind the creature's ear ridge, and the purring grew louder. "There we go," he whispered. "You are not so scary after all, are you?" For 3 hours, David sat with the Ravenclaw cub in that abandoned storage bay. The creature had finally relaxed enough to lie down beside him, its massive head resting near his leg. Every so often it would lift its head and look around, checking for threats. But then it would settle again with that deep purring sound. David examined the wound on its side as carefully as he could without making sudden movements. The cut was clean but deep, probably from the sharp metal edges of the cargo pod. It needed proper medical attention, but David did not have the supplies here. What he did have was basic first aid training and a lot of experience with injured animals. He pulled his jacket off slowly and tore a strip from his undershirt. The Ravenclaw watched with mild interest as David wetted the cloth with water from his bottle and gently dabbed at the wound. The creature flinched but did not pull away. It seemed to understand that David was trying to help. "This would be easier with actual medical supplies," David said quietly. "But we work with what we have." The communicator on the floor suddenly crackled to life at full volume. Brent's voice was frantic. "Cole, if you can hear this, respond immediately. Wildlife Control has been contacted and they are arriving early. They have authorization to terminate the creature on site. You need to get out of there now." David grabbed the communicator. "Commander, tell them to hold their fire. The situation is under control." There was a moment of shocked silence. Then Brent's voice came back, shaking with disbelief. "Under control? Cole, are you insane? That is a Ravenclaw. I know what it is, and I am telling you it is not acting aggressive. It is injured and scared. If Wildlife Control comes in shooting, they will trigger exactly the kind of response everyone is afraid of. You do not understand the protocols. These creatures are classified as kill on sight in civilian areas. There is no negotiation." David looked at the Ravenclaw, who had lifted its head at the sound of raised voices. He scratched behind its ear ridge again, and the creature relaxed. "Then you need to change the protocols. I am sitting here petting this thing like it is a house cat. It is purring, Commander. When was the last time you heard of a dangerous predator purring?" Another voice cut into the channel, cold, clipped, and authoritative. "This is Officer Gillis Reed of Galactic Wildlife Control. Human, you are in violation of multiple safety regulations. Move away from the creature immediately, or you will be considered an obstruction to official operations." David's jaw tightened. "Officer Reed, I am not moving. This animal is hurt and calm. There is no reason to kill it." "There is every reason. Ravenclaws are responsible for hundreds of deaths across the known systems. They cannot be domesticated, controlled, or safely contained. Your emotional response to the situation does not change the facts." "My emotional response?" David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Officer, I am the only one here looking at the facts. This cub is injured, alone, and far from its natural habitat. It did not ask to be shipped in a cargo container. It is not attacking anyone right now. The only danger here is what you are about to create. Stand down, human. That is a direct order. David switched off the communicator and tossed it aside. The Ravenclaw was watching him now with those intelligent amber eyes, head tilted slightly as if asking what was wrong. We have a problem, friend. There are people coming who do not understand you. They see a monster. I see a scared kid who got dealt a bad hand. The creature made a soft chirping sound, almost questioning. David stood up slowly, and the Ravenclaw immediately scrambled to its feet, ready to follow. It limped heavily on the injured leg, but stayed close to David's side, looking up at him as if asking for direction. An idea formed in David's mind. It was risky and probably violated even more regulations, but it might be the only way to save the creature's life. "Can you follow me?" David asked. He started walking toward the door, moving slowly. The Ravenclaw hesitated for only a moment before limping after him, staying within arm's reach. When David stopped, it stopped. When he moved, it followed. David smiled despite the situation. The creature was already bonding with him, recognizing him as safe. This was behavior he had seen in dozens of different animals back home. Fear created aggression, but trust created cooperation. He led the Ravenclaw back through the corridors toward Section 7. The station was still on lockdown, so the halls were empty. Security cameras tracked their movement, and David knew that every alien on the station was watching the feeds in complete shock. His destination was the main observation deck, a large room with reinforced windows that looked out into space. It was also the station's emergency gathering point, equipped with communication arrays and recording equipment. If David was going to make his case, he needed an audience. He reached the observation deck and triggered the manual door release. The Ravenclaw followed him inside, looking around at the new space with curiosity. David walked to the center of the room, directly in view of the main security camera, and the creature settled beside him. David activated the station-wide broadcast system. "This is David Cole. I am broadcasting to everyone on this station and anyone monitoring our channels. What you are seeing right now is a Ravenclaw cub. Yes, it is large, and yes, it looks dangerous. But I want you to watch what happens next." He knelt down beside the creature and held up his hand. The Ravenclaw immediately pressed its head into his palm, purring. David scratched its scales gently, and the creature's tail swished back and forth with contentment. This animal is not a mindless killer. It is hurt, scared, and alone. It has not attacked me. It has not tried to escape. It has responded to calm behavior with calm behavior. The galactic community has decided that Ravenclaws must be destroyed on sight. I am asking you to reconsider that decision. He could hear bootsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy armored, moving fast. Wildlife control was here. If you kill this creature, you are not protecting anyone. You are just proving that the galaxy would rather choose fear than understanding. I am not moving. If Officer Reed wants to shoot this Ravenclaw, he will have to shoot through me first. The door burst open, and armed officers in protective gear flooded into the room. At their lead was a tall Fornax in command armor, his weapon raised and ready. Gillis Reed had arrived. 6 armed officers stood in the observation deck doorway, weapons trained on the Ravenclaw. The cub immediately sensed the threat and moved in front of David, placing its body between him and the newcomers. It did not growl or attack, but its posture shifted into something defensive and ready. Gillis Reed stepped forward, his face hard behind the transparent visor of his helmet. He was tall for a Fornax, with the kind of bearing that came from years of dangerous work. His armor was scarred and dented, proof that he had faced real threats before. "Human, this is your last warning. Step away from the creature." David stayed exactly where he was, one hand resting on the Ravenclaw's back. He could feel the tension in the creature's muscles, coiled and ready to spring. The purring had stopped. "Officer Reed, lower your weapons. You are scaring it. That thing should be scared. It is about to die. Only if you make it fight. Right now it is protecting me, not hunting you. There is a difference." Reed's grip on his weapon tightened. "I have spent 15 years dealing with dangerous species across 8 sectors. I have seen what Ravenclaws do. I have cleaned up the aftermath. You are an idealistic fool who is going to get himself killed." "Maybe," David admitted, "but I am also the person who has been sitting with this creature for hours without a scratch." "What does that tell you?" "It tells me you got lucky. Ravenclaws are unpredictable. One moment they are calm, the next they are tearing through bulkheads." David shook his head. "You know what I think? I think nobody has ever actually tried to understand these animals. Everyone sees the horror stories and assumes that is all they are. But animals do not work that way. They react to how they are treated. This is not a debate. Reed raised his weapon higher, sighting down the barrel at the Ravenclaw's head. Final warning. Move or be charged with obstruction. The Ravenclaw tensed, reading the threat in Reed's body language. Its tail lashed once, and David felt the creature's muscles bunching for a leap. If it attacked now, Reed's team would fire, and this whole observation deck would become a bloodbath. David did the only thing he could think of. He stepped in front of the Ravenclaw completely, putting his body between the cub and the weapons. Then charge me. But you are not killing this animal. The room fell into tense silence. David could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Behind him, the Ravenclaw made a soft questioning sound, confused about why David had moved. Reed's finger hovered over the trigger. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Commander Brent's voice crackled over the station intercom. Wildlife Control, this is Station Commander Brent. Hold your fire. I repeat, hold your fire. Reed did not lower his weapon. Commander, with respect, you do not have authority over my operations. No, but I do have authority over this station, and I am ordering you to stand down while we assess the situation. The situation is clear. There is a Class 5 predator loose on a civilian station. Protocols are explicit. Protocols written by people who have never seen what we are seeing right now. Brent's voice was steady, but firm. Officer Reed, I am watching the same security feeds you are. That creature has had multiple opportunities to attack Cole, and it has not. It is protecting him. That is not typical Ravenclaw behavior. It is confused and injured. Once it recovers, its true nature will emerge. You do not know that. None of us do. Brent paused. I am making an official request for a 48-hour observation period before any lethal action is taken. During that time, we will monitor the creature's behavior and determine if it poses an actual threat. Reed's jaw worked in frustration. And if it attacks someone during those 48 hours? Who takes responsibility? I do, David said immediately. If this creature hurts anyone, it is on me. But I need time to prove that it does not have to end this way. Reed finally lowered his weapon slightly. You are making a mistake. Both of you. Maybe, Brent replied. But it is our mistake to make. Stand down, officer. The tension in the room slowly dissolved. Reed's team lowered their weapons but did not leave. They spread out along the walls, keeping the Ravenclaw in sight but no longer actively threatening it. The cub relaxed fractionally and moved back to David's side, pressing against his leg. It kept watching the armed officers with wary eyes, but the defensive posture faded. David let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Thank you, Commander. Do not thank me yet. You have 48 hours to prove your point. If that creature shows any sign of aggression, Reed gets to finish his job. Understood? Understood. Reed walked closer, stopping about 10 feet away. Up close, David could see the scars on the Fornax's face, the marks of a career spent in dangerous places. This was not a man who made decisions lightly. You think you can tame it? Reed asked, his voice quieter now. I do not want to tame it. I want to show that it can be understood. There is a difference. In 48 hours, the Galactic Council will review this case. They will see the footage and make a decision. If they rule against you, I will carry out the termination order personally. Are you prepared for that? David looked down at the Ravenclaw, which gazed back up at him with those intelligent amber eyes. The creature chirped softly and nuzzled his hand. I will not let it come to that. Reed studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You have courage, human. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. Do not waste it. He signaled his team and they filed out of the observation deck, leaving David alone with the Ravenclaw. The station intercom crackled again. Cole, medical supplies are being sent to your location. Try to treat that wound properly before you do anything else. And Cole? Yes, Commander. The entire galaxy is watching this. Every news feed from here to the core systems has picked up the story. You are either about to become a hero or a cautionary tale. I hope you know what you are doing. David sat down beside the Ravenclaw and the creature immediately curled up next to him, resting its head on his lap. He scratched behind its ear ridge and the purring started again, deep and rhythmic. So do I, Commander. So do I. The medical supplies arrived within the hour, delivered by a nervous Quillen technician who refused to enter the observation deck. He left the container outside the door and hurried away. David retrieved it while the Ravenclaw watched curiously from inside the room. The wound needed cleaning and sealing, but the cub was surprisingly patient, David worked slowly, talking the whole time, explaining what he was doing. The Ravenclaw would flinch occasionally when the antiseptic stung, but it never snapped or tried to pull away. It seemed to trust that David knew what he was doing. "There," David said finally, applying the last of the medical sealant. "That should hold until proper treatment is available. The leg is going to need more attention, though. Probably a fracture." The creature chirped and licked his hand with that rough tongue. David smiled and scratched its head. Outside the observation deck's windows, the station's docking ring was visible, along with the endless dark of space beyond. Ships came and went, their lights blinking in the distance. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was arguing about what should happen to the creature sitting beside him. David's communicator buzzed. He checked the screen and saw dozens of messages waiting. News outlets, scientific organizations, animal rights groups, and even a few governments. Everyone wanted a statement, an interview, an opinion. He ignored them all except for one message from Commander Brent. "Council hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Be ready to present your case. The odds are not good." David typed back a simple reply. "Understood." The Ravenclaw shifted position, trying to get comfortable despite the injured leg. David helped it settle onto a cushioned section near the window where it could stretch out fully. The creature rumbled contentedly and closed 4 of its 6 eyes. The other 2 remained half open, watching the room. "You need a name," David said quietly. "Cannot just keep calling you the Ravenclaw." The creature's tail twitched as if responding. David thought for a moment. The cub was fast when it moved, even with the injured leg. Quick and graceful like a river current. "How about Runner? You move like water when you are healthy." The Ravenclaw's tail twitched again, more deliberately this time. David took it as approval. Over the next 20 hours, David established a routine with Runner. Feeding times, rest periods, and simple training exercises. He used hand signals and whistles to teach basic commands. Sit, stay, come. Runner learned faster than any animal David had worked with before. The intelligence behind those amber eyes was obvious. Other station personnel began to approach the observation deck, watching through the windows. At first they kept their distance, terrified and fascinated in equal measure. But as time passed and nothing violent happened, curiosity won out over fear. A Quillen engineer named Oscar was the first to enter the room. He was young, maybe just out of training, with bright, curious eyes and a voice that shook when he spoke. "Is it safe?" Oscar asked from the doorway. "Depends on what you mean by safe," David replied. "Runner will not attack you unless you give her a reason. Move slowly, speak quietly, and let her come to you if she wants to. Do not try to touch her without permission." Oscar took 3 careful steps into the room. Runner lifted her head and watched him with interest but no hostility. Her scales shifted color slightly, from deep violet to a lighter shade that almost looked blue in the observation deck's lighting. "She is beautiful," Oscar whispered. "Want to feed her?" David held out a chunk of protein ration. "Hold it flat on your palm, fingers together, arm extended. Let her take it from you." Oscar looked terrified but determined. He took the food and extended his arm, hand trembling. Runner stood up slowly, limped over on 3 legs, and sniffed Oscar's hand carefully. Then, with surprising gentleness, she took the food and retreated a few steps to eat it. Oscar's face lit up with wonder. "I just fed a Ravenclaw." "You just fed Runner," David corrected. "She is not just her species. She is an individual." Word spread fast. Within hours, a small crowd had gathered outside the observation deck. Station personnel, cargo handlers, even a few passengers from docked ships. They watched through the windows as David worked with Runner, teaching her to respond to commands, to accept food from different people, to tolerate being touched and examined. The galactic news feeds were running continuous coverage. David caught snippets on the observation deck's display screen. Experts debated whether what he was doing was brilliant or suicidal. Some called him a hero. Others called him a dangerous fool. Opinion pieces argued both sides with equal passion, but the footage spoke for itself. Runner curled up beside David when she slept. She followed his commands. She accepted food from Oscar and 2 other brave volunteers. She was calm, responsive, and clearly bonded to the human who had shown her kindness. Gillis Reed appeared in the doorway late that evening. He was out of his armor now, wearing a simple uniform. His expression was complicated, somewhere between frustration and grudging respect. "The council hearing is in 8 hours, Reed said without preamble. "They have been watching the feeds. And they are divided. Some want to uphold the termination order. Others are suggesting that your creature represents a unique opportunity for research. A few are arguing for immediate release into a protected habitat. What do you think should happen? David asked. Reed was quiet for a long moment, watching Runner sleep peacefully near the window. I think you have done something I would not have believed possible, but I also think you are one bad moment away from proving me right about how dangerous these creatures are. The Council needs to see consistency. They need proof that this is not just a temporary fluke. Then we will give them proof. I hope you can. Because if this goes wrong tomorrow, it will not just be the creature that suffers. It will set back any chance of revising how we handle dangerous species for decades. The pressure on you is immense. David looked at Runner, who was snoring softly, her scales rising and falling with each breath. She did not ask for any of this. All she wants is to be safe and comfortable. If showing the galaxy that Ravenclaws can be understood helps other creatures like her, then the pressure is worth it. Reed nodded slowly. Get some rest. Tomorrow will determine everything. After Reed left, David settled beside Runner. The creature stirred and opened her eyes, then shifted to rest her head on his leg. The purring started again, a sound that no Ravenclaw expert in the galaxy thought was possible. Tomorrow we change some minds, David whispered. Ready? Runner chirped softly and closed her eyes again. Ready. The Galactic Council chamber appeared on the observation deck's main screen at exactly Oro 800 station time. 15 council members from different species sat in a semicircle, their images transmitted across thousands of light years. At the center sat High Counselor Petra, a dignified Quillen with silver fur and sharp, intelligent eyes. David stood in front of the camera with Runner sitting calmly beside him. The cub had grown noticeably larger in just 2 days, her scales brighter and her movements more confident despite the healing leg. She watched the screen with interest, her tail swishing slowly. This hearing will determine the fate of the Ravenclaw specimen currently designated as Cargo Breach 7, Petra announced. We have reviewed the security footage and the reports from Station Commander Brent and Wildlife Control Officer Reed. Technician David Cole, you have requested an alternative to immediate termination. Please state your case. David took a breath. Half the galaxy was watching this broadcast. What he said in the next few minutes would matter not just for Runner, but for how the galactic community treated dangerous species everywhere. High Counselor, members of the Council, my name is David Cole and I am a maintenance technician from Earth Colony Harvest 7. I grew up around predators. I learned from my grandfather that fear and violence create more fear and violence, but patience and understanding can create cooperation. He gestured to Runner, who tilted her head at the mention of her name. This is Runner. 2 days ago, she was classified as a kill-on-sight threat. Today, she responds to commands. She accepts food from multiple handlers. She has been examined, treated for injuries, and has shown zero aggression toward anyone who approaches her with calm intent. This is not luck. This is the result of treating her like an intelligent being instead of a mindless monster. One of the council members, a fornax with military decorations, leaned forward. Your anecdotal success does not override centuries of documented Ravenclaw attacks. How do you explain the deaths attributed to this species? I do not excuse them, David replied, but I ask you to consider the circumstances. Most Ravenclaw encounters happen during poaching operations, habitat destruction, or cargo trafficking incidents. These animals are torn from their homes, traumatized, and then treated as threats when they react with fear. We create the violence we claim to be protecting against. Are you suggesting, another council member asked slowly, that Ravenclaws are not inherently dangerous? I am suggesting that danger is not the same as evil. A Ravenclaw is dangerous the same way a human is dangerous, or a fornax, or any species with strength and intelligence. We are all capable of violence, but we are also capable of choice. Runner has chosen not to harm anyone because she has been given a reason to trust instead of fight. Petra raised a hand for silence. You propose what exactly? That we release this creature into your custody? I propose that we stop using termination as our default response. I propose we establish proper rehabilitation protocols for dangerous species. I propose we admit that the galaxy has been operating from a position of fear instead of wisdom. The council chamber erupted into argument. Some members supported David's position, others vehemently opposed it. The debate raged for 20 minutes while David stood waiting, his hand resting on Runner's head. Finally, Petra called for order. We will put this to a vote. However, before we do, I want to see one more demonstration. Technician Cole, can you command the creature to perform a complex sequence of actions? David nodded. He stepped back from Runner and held up his hand. Runner, sit. The Ravenclaw sat immediately, her tail curled around her body. Stay. David walked across the observation deck to the far wall, about 30 feet away. Runner remained sitting, though her eyes tracked his movement. David whistled 3 short notes. Runner stood and limped quickly to his side, sitting down again when she reached him. Good girl, David said, scratching behind her ear ridge. The purring was loud enough to be picked up by the broadcast microphone. One of the council members was shaking her head in disbelief. Impossible. Ravenclaws do not bond. They do not train. They do not respond to anything except their predatory instincts. Then perhaps, David said quietly, we have not been asking them the right way. The vote was called. It took less than 5 minutes. When the results appeared on screen, David felt his chest tighten. 11-4 in favor of establishing a trial rehabilitation program. The council has decided, Petra announced, that the Ravenclaw designated as Runner will be placed under a temporary guardianship protocol. Technician Cole, you will transport the creature to the Outer Rim Wildlife Sanctuary on Delta Station, where proper facilities exist for long-term care. You will remain as her primary handler during a 6-month evaluation period. At the end of that time, we will assess whether this approach is viable for broader application. David felt Runner press against his leg, sensing his emotion. He reached down and scratched her head, fighting to keep his voice steady. Thank you, High Counselor. We will not let you down. See that you do not. This decision has been controversial. Many in the galactic community believe we are making a dangerous mistake. You must prove them wrong. The transmission ended. For a moment, David just stood there processing what had happened. Then Oscar appeared in the doorway, followed by Commander Brent and a small crowd of station personnel. They were clapping. You did it, Brent said, his voice warm with approval. You actually did it. We did it, David corrected. He looked down at Runner, who was watching the crowd with calm curiosity. She did most of the work just by being herself. Over the next week, David prepared for transport to Delta Station. News of the Council's decision spread across every system. Scientists requested permission to study Runner. Animal welfare organizations offered funding and support. 3 other stations reported similar incidents with dangerous species and asked for human consultants to help manage them peacefully. The day before departure, Gillis Reed appeared one last time. He stood outside the observation deck, watching through the window as David worked with Runner on physical therapy exercises for her healing leg. When David noticed him, he invited Reed inside. The Fornax entered cautiously, but Runner merely glanced at him before returning her attention to David. I owe you an apology, Reed said stiffly. I have spent my career believing that termination was the only solution. You proved me wrong. You were doing your job based on the information you had. No apology needed. Still, Reed paused, then continued. The Galactic Wildlife Control has asked me to help develop new protocols based on what you have accomplished here. They want to train officers in non-lethal approaches. I told them I would need a consultant. Someone with practical experience, David smiled. Are you offering me a job, Officer Reed? I am offering you a chance to change how the galaxy deals with dangerous species. Interested? David looked at Runner, who had curled up near his feet and was watching the conversation with those intelligent amber eyes. She chirped softly and nudged his hand with her nose. Yeah, David said. I think we are very interested. 3 months later, David stood in a training facility on Delta Station, teaching a class of wildlife control officers the basics of animal behavior. Runner lay beside his podium, now nearly twice the size she had been on that first day. She was healthy, strong, and completely bonded to David. During breaks, she would play with the officers who had learned not to fear her. She would perform complex command sequences that amazed observers, and every night she would curl up beside David and purr until they both fell asleep. The galaxy was slowly learning what David had always known. Fear created monsters, but understanding created friends. And sometimes, with patience and courage, you could teach the galaxy the difference.